Before the Sermon on the Mount, before Lazarus, before the cross, there was a 5-year-old boy in Nazareth who killed another child with a single word. The story is real. It is 2,000 years old. And the church spent 17 centuries making sure you would never read it. You're reading a children's Bible aloud, the illustrated kind, soft watercolors, gentle Jesus with a lamb over his shoulders, sunlight through clouds, children gathered around his feet. Your child is 7 years old, maybe 8, and they're fighting sleep, but not that hard, because they like this part of the night. You get to the end of a story. Luke chapter 2. Jesus at 12 years old in the temple, astonishing the teachers. And before you close the book, your child asks the question, what was Jesus like when he was little? You pause. You look at the illustration, the watercolors, the lamb, you know the temple at 12, you know the baptism at 30. 18 years between those two moments, and the canonical Gospels cover them in a single sentence. Luke chapter 2, verse 52. And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature, and in favor with God and man. That's it. 18 years. One sentence. You tell your child what you were told. He was kind and gentle. Just like in the picture. The child closes their eyes. You walk into the hallway and pull the door halfway shut, and the question doesn't let you go, because what you just told your child was not a fact. It was the silence the church decided to give you instead of the truth. And somewhere in a university library right now, that truth is sitting on a shelf. It has been there for 17 centuries. Scholars have read it. Church fathers engaged with it. Multiple languages, multiple manuscripts, multiple ancient communities treated it as authentic. The church didn't lose these stories about the child Jesus. They decided you were not allowed to read them. My name is Nathan. Some of you know me by now, former history teacher. 12 years at a Catholic school in Evansville, Indiana. Resigned when the questions I was asking made the administration uncomfortable. What I do now is what they couldn't let me do then. Follow the evidence wherever it goes. The question about Jesus' childhood wasn't something I started with. It came to me sideways, the way the important ones usually do. I was researching what scholars call the silent years, the 18 years between Jesus at the temple and Jesus at the Jordan River for his baptism. Standard historical method. You look for what people were saying in the first 2 centuries. Not just the canonical texts, all the texts. What was circulating, what communities were reading, what the early church fathers felt strongly enough about to argue with. And I found something that made me stop. Not a fringe text, not a manuscript discovered last year in a cave nobody's heard of. A document that multiple church fathers referenced by name, that circulated in Greek, Syriac, Latin, and Slavonic across the entire ancient Christian world. That was still in wide use when the Roman Empire fell. The Infancy Gospel of Thomas, 2nd century CE, covers Jesus from age 5 to age 12. Tony Burke at York University has spent his career on this text. The leading contemporary scholarly edition is his 2010 critical edition, De Infantia Jesu Evangelium Thomae Grace. It's not a short text, it's not vague, it covers specific incidents, specific names, specific locations. And what it describes is a child Jesus that is unlike anything you will find in a Sunday school curriculum. Because the Jesus in this text kills, and blinds, and curses, and cannot be taught. And what stopped me cold, what I'm still sitting with, is that the church didn't suppress this text because it was obviously fictional. They suppressed it because it was theologically impossible to live with. Let me walk you through what the Infancy Gospel of Thomas actually says, not a summary. The specific incidents, chapter by chapter. Chapter 2. Jesus is 5 years old. He's playing beside a stream on the Sabbath. He gathers the water into pools with his hands. He molds the clay from the bank into 12 sparrows. A Jewish man passes by, sees a child working on the Sabbath, molding objects, creating forms, and reports it to Joseph. Joseph comes, confronts the boy. Jesus looks at the sparrows, claps his hands. The 12 clay birds become living birds and fly away. The Sabbath violation disappears. The evidence vanishes. A 5-year-old child just animated matter with a gesture. Now hold that image. A child beside a stream. 12 clay birds lifting off. Keep it in your mind, because we're going to come back to those birds. Chapter 4 begins immediately after. Jesus is still 5. He's walking through the village. A boy runs through the street and brushes Jesus' shoulder, a child's shoulder, an accidental contact on a village path. Jesus looks at him and says, "You shall not complete your journey." The boy falls dead immediately, not sick, not injured, dead. The village parents see what happened. They go to Joseph. The text records their exact words. "Your son cannot live with us in this village. Teach him to bless rather than curse, for he is killing our children." Joseph takes Jesus by the ear and pulls it hard. He's not gentle. He's afraid of what his son has done. He tells Jesus, "Why are you doing things like this? These people suffer and they hate us." Jesus' response to his father is not remorse. It's correction. He says, "It is enough for you to seek and not find." He's 5 years old, and he's telling his father he doesn't need to explain himself. Chapter 5. The parents of the dead boy come to Joseph. They accuse. They demand. Jesus turns and looks at them. He strikes them blind. Joseph is horrified. He seizes Jesus by the ear again, and Jesus rebukes him directly. "It is enough for you to seek and not find. You act unwisely, and I do not know you. Whatever you say, you do not know what you are saying to me." A 5-year-old God who cannot be corrected by his father, who kills by word, blinds by glance, and responds to discipline with a lecture on the limits of human understanding. The early church fathers read this text. Origen of Alexandria referenced miracle stories about the childhood of Jesus circulating in his time. Irenaeus of Lyon, writing around 180 CE, before most canonical Gospels were finalized, was aware of texts claiming Jesus performed miracles as a child, and he warned against their misuse. He didn't say they were false. He said they were dangerous. That distinction matters enormously. Now look at the other side of the text. Because the Infancy Gospel of Thomas is not only a document of death and blindings, it's also a document of healing, of mercy, of a child learning, erratically, imperfectly, to manage what he carries. Chapter 9. A boy named Zeno falls from the roof of a building and dies. The other children in the village scatter. They run because they assume Jesus caused it. The accusation precedes him. Wherever a child dies, the village assumes the 5-year-old with uncontrollable power is responsible. Jesus descends to where Zeno's body lies. He stands over him and says, "Zeno, arise and tell me, did I push you?" Zeno sits up. He says, "No, Lord, you did not throw me down, but you raised me up." The boy is alive. The accusation dissolves. Chapter 10. Jesus' brother James, the same James who will later lead the Jerusalem church, is bitten by a viper in the field. The bite is severe. James is dying. Jesus runs to him. He breathes on the wound. The viper's poison withdraws. James is immediately healed. The child who killed with a word can heal with a breath. And then chapters 6 through 8. The failed teachers. Joseph tries twice to send Jesus to school. First teacher, a man named Zacchaeus attempting to teach the alphabet. He takes Jesus' hand, begins at the letter Alpha. Jesus will not answer. He looks at the teacher and says, "Tell me first the meaning of Alpha, and then I will tell you the meaning of Beta." Zacchaeus tries to explain. Jesus cuts him off. He delivers a discourse on cosmic mysteries, on the dual nature of letters, on the geometry of the universe, on things no human teacher could understand. Zacchaeus collapses. He tells Joseph, "This child is no ordinary being. He carries fire. Take him away from me." Second teacher. This one is less patient. When Jesus refuses to perform in class, the teacher strikes him on the head. Jesus curses him immediately. The teacher falls senseless. Joseph, watching his son destroy another educator, is at a loss. He tells Mary, "From now on, let us not allow him to go outside because everyone who angers him dies. I need you to hold 2 images at the same time. The watercolor Jesus from the children's Bible, lamb over his shoulders, sunlight. Children gathered in peace around his feet. And a 5-year-old boy in a Galilean village who told another child, 'You shall not complete your journey,' and was immediately obeyed. The same person. 2,000 years ago. One of those images is in every Sunday school classroom in the world. It's on cards, in picture books, on the walls of hospital pediatric wards. The other was officially classified as too dangerous to preserve. The Gelasian decree, issued around 500 CE, is what formally categorized the Infancy Gospel of Thomas as apocryphal. Before that decree, it circulated for 3 centuries in multiple languages across the entire Christian world. And here is what I need you to understand about the word apocryphal. It doesn't mean false, it means hidden, set aside, not for everyone. The church didn't say, this is fiction, this is fantasy, these stories never happened. They said, these stories create a problem we cannot solve. And that problem has a name. If Jesus killed as a child, if his power operated without ethical control, without the framework of mercy and forgiveness that defines his adult ministry, then when did he develop the moral wisdom of the Sermon on the Mount? If divine power operates by impulse at age 5, free will becomes meaningless. God kills arbitrarily. The gentle shepherd the church spent 2 millennia teaching you about didn't exist yet at 5, or 10, or 12, when he was already astonishing teachers in the temple. The theological cost of including the Infancy Gospel of Thomas was catastrophic. A God who had to learn to control his own power. A God who made mistakes with lethal consequences. A God who grew into his own morality. That is not the Jesus the institution could sell. So they made him disappear from childhood. They replaced him with silence. And the silence implied innocence. Bart Ehrman at the University of North Carolina has written directly about this suppression. The church's discomfort was not with the text's authenticity. It was with what the text asked. What kind of God cannot control himself? You've probably done what Joseph did, or what Marcus did. Marcus is a friend of mine from college. I'm godfather to his son Eli, who's 8 years old now. 3 years ago, when Eli was 5, I was visiting Marcus and his wife on a Saturday afternoon. I was watching the kids play in the backyard through the kitchen window while Marcus made coffee. Eli was playing with the neighbor's boy, a year younger, maybe 4. The neighbor's kid had spent a good hour building a sandcastle, a careful one. He'd found sticks to mark the corners. Eli walked over to it. He looked at the boy directly, and then he pressed both hands flat on the top of the sandcastle and crushed it slowly, deliberately, watching the boy's face the entire time. No rage, no argument, just calm, deliberate. The neighbor's boy started crying. Marcus saw it from the window too. He went out, handled it quickly, took Eli aside, made him apologize, walked him through why it was wrong. Inside, 10 minutes it was over. That evening when Marcus told his wife what happened, the story was already softer. They had a little clash over the sandcastle. By the time Marcus mentioned it to me the following week, Eli had gotten upset and knocked it over accidentally. I'm the only one who saw the original act. I understand why they softened it. When you love someone, and especially a child, you edit the moments that disturb you. You protect them. You replace what you can't reconcile with something you can live with. You choose the story you need over the story that happened. The disciples were those people, and Jesus was their child. The early Christians who read the Infancy Gospel of Thomas and chose to soften it, to eventually suppress it, weren't lying. They were doing what Marcus did. They were protecting someone they loved, and they were protecting the image of that person they needed. The gentle shepherd, the meek and mild, the Jesus that Isaac Watts put into the hymn in 1715 that most of you have sung without once wondering what it replaced. But there's a difference. What Marcus edited was a sandcastle. What the church edited was a question about the nature of God that you were never allowed to ask. Now here's the part of this story that I was not prepared for, the part that reframes everything. I was tracing the clay sparrows. Specifically, why did that miracle survive when so many others didn't? Why did that particular story, a 5-year-old boy animating clay birds with a clap of his hands, persist in manuscript form across so many traditions and so many centuries? And then I found it. The Quran, Surah 3, verse 49. I will make for you a bird from clay. Breathe into it, and it will become a real bird, by Allah's will. I stopped reading. I called a friend of mine who teaches Islamic studies at Indiana University. I asked her, is this what I think it is? She said yes. Surah 3, verse 49. Every Muslim child learns it. It's standard. It's uncontroversial. It's part of the canonical description of Jesus, the Prophet Isa, in Islamic tradition. Same miracle. Clay birds, brought to life by breath. I asked her, where does that story come from? She said, from the childhood of Jesus, in the early Christian sources. Gabriel Said Reynolds at Notre Dame, in his 2018 commentary, The Quran and the Bible, is explicit about this. He writes, the miracle of Jesus creating a bird or birds from clay, and his bringing it to life with his breath, is known from the apocryphal childhood of the Savior, 2nd century AD, commonly and erroneously referred to as the Infancy Gospel of Thomas. Surah 5, verse 110 repeats the account, nearly identical. The Quran was compiled in the 7th century CE. The Infancy Gospel of Thomas had been in circulation for 5 centuries by then. It was circulating with enough authority, enough credibility, enough widespread acceptance across ancient Christian communities that Muhammad's community preserved it as divine revelation. The miracle that Christianity buried, Islam venerated. Somewhere right now, a Muslim child is being taught that Jesus, their prophet Isa, breathed life into clay birds. They are taught this as divine truth. They are taught this from a text their tradition considers the direct word of God. The story Christianity classified as too dangerous to keep, Islam preserved as sacred. And for 14 centuries, no one in either tradition stopped to ask the obvious question. Why did one tradition keep what the other decided to destroy? J.J. Benítez spent 40 years on this. 15 trips to Israel, 17 novels in the Trojan Horse series, Caballo de Troya. The 4th book, Nazareth, published in 1996, deals directly with the years the canonical Gospels skip over. Benítez is not an academic. He's something more difficult to categorize, a journalist who went looking for the historical Jesus and couldn't stop once he started. He reads the primary sources. He visits the locations. He cross-references archaeology with the apocryphal texts. And on the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, his interpretation is the one I keep returning to. He doesn't accept the violent child at face value, but he doesn't dismiss the text either. What he proposes is something that disturbed me more than the killings and the blindings. He proposes a child who was fully aware of his divine nature, but had not yet learned to live inside it. Not malice, not violence for its own sake. Something stranger, and in some ways more troubling. A child who hadn't yet developed the human moral framework to understand that his words had permanent consequences. That when he said, "You shall not complete your journey," to another child, a child he perceived as a nuisance, an interruption, he was not making a choice in any moral sense. He didn't understand yet what death meant for a human being. He had divine power, operating in a human body that was still developing the human capacity to understand what that power did. A God learning to be human. And the theological problem that creates is not smaller than the one the church tried to avoid. It's larger, because a God who had to learn, a God who made irreversible mistakes with human lives before he developed the moral wisdom to understand what he was doing. A God who needed Joseph to grab his ear and tell him, "People are dying because of you." This shatters the doctrine of divine perfection from birth in a way that simple fiction never could. The church was not afraid these stories were false. They were afraid they were true, and that there was no theological answer to what they implied. Go back to the hallway. You're standing outside your child's bedroom. The door is halfway open. You can hear the small sounds of sleep beginning. The children's Bible is on the nightstand, the watercolor Jesus, the lamb, the gentle light. You told your child what you were told. He was kind, he was gentle, he was just like in the picture. And that was enough to close the night, enough to quiet the question, enough to get through the bedtime ritual that humans have always needed to survive the dark. But there is another version of that book. It's not on the nightstand. It's in a university library with a catalog number. It's in the footnotes of a Notre Dame scholar's commentary on the Quran. It's in the academic edition Tony Burke published at York University in 2010. It circulated in Greek, Syriac, Latin, and Slavonic for 3 centuries before the church decided you were not allowed to read it. In that version, the 5-year-old boy beside the stream, who turned clay into birds, is not followed by a lamb and sunlight. He's followed by a dead child on a village path, a blind man and woman, a series of teachers who learned too late that this student could not be corrected. The same boy, the same 2,000 years. One version required courage to write. It asked, what if divinity inside a human child is not automatically gentle? What if omnipotence without moral development is something closer to catastrophe? What if the 18 silent years between temple and baptism were the years a God spent learning with genuine difficulty how to live as a human being without destroying the people around him? The other version required something different. Not courage, control, the careful management of what questions are permitted, the long, slow replacement of the disturbing image with the one that could be put on a nightstand and closed before sleep. The bedtime story the church gave you is not the whole story. The story they put away is still there. You decide what to do with it.